You're driving through quiet, dimly lit streets, delivering food to strangers who eagerly await their meal. The monotony of the job is comforting, until it isn't. You pull up to a house, and for a moment, something feels off. You tell yourself it's nothing, but deep down, you know it's not. Tonight, we're diving into 3 real-life food delivery horror stories that will leave you second-guessing every knock on the door. It was late, around midnight, and I was on my final delivery of the night. I had been working as a food delivery driver for a few months, and the job was mostly uneventful. That evening, the streets were quiet, almost too quiet. The GPS guided me to a house on the outskirts of town, an old, run-down place that seemed forgotten by time. When I pulled up, the porch light was flickering, barely giving off any light. I hesitated for a moment, taking in the eerie atmosphere. There were no cars in the driveway, no sounds of life inside. Still, I grabbed the food bag and approached the door, telling myself it was just another delivery. I knocked, but there was no answer. Just as I was about to leave, I heard a faint voice from inside. "Come in, it's open," a woman said. Her voice was shaky, almost desperate. I froze. It didn't feel right, but I convinced myself she might be injured or unable to come to the door. Against my better judgment, I opened the door and stepped inside. The house was dark except for a dim light coming from a doorway at the end of the hall. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. "I'm in the basement. Can you bring it down here?" The woman's voice answered, sounding closer this time. Something about the way she spoke made my stomach tighten. I should have left, but I didn't. I walked toward the basement door, the floorboards creaking under my feet. As I descended the narrow, steep staircase, the air grew colder, the smell of dampness heavy. Halfway down, I noticed something. Movement, just at the edge of the shadows. My heart pounded in my chest. Then I heard it, a low, raspy breathing. But it wasn't coming from the woman. There were others down there, hidden in the dark. My instincts screamed at me to turn around, but before I could move, a voice, not the woman's, whispered from the shadows, "Come closer." A wave of fear surged through me. I dropped the food, my hands shaking, and bolted up the stairs as fast as I could. Behind me, I heard footsteps, several sets of them, rushing up the stairs. Laughter followed, dark and menacing. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands trembling. I sprinted to my car without looking back, my heart racing. I called the police as soon as I was far enough away. When the authorities arrived, they found the house abandoned. No woman, no signs of life. But in the basement, they made a disturbing discovery. Chains, restraints bolted to the floor, and old bloodstains on the walls. I often think about what would have happened if I had taken just a few more steps into that basement. And every time I do, a chill runs down my spine. I had been doing food deliveries for a while, and the money was decent. It was usually uneventful. Pick up, drop off, repeat. But there was this one customer who stood out. He always ordered late at night, and his address was way out in the suburbs, miles away from any main roads. It felt off, but the tips were good, so I didn't think too much about it at first. The first few times I delivered to him, he'd answer the door with a wide grin, his eyes lingering a little too long on me. His house was tidy but too perfect, like a show home no one really lived in. He never said much, just thanks and have a good night. But there was always something unsettling about his gaze. It felt like he was studying me. One night, around 11:30, I got another order from him. The app notified me as soon as I logged on. I remember thinking it was strange how fast he placed the order, as if he'd been waiting for me. I grabbed the food and headed to his house, telling myself it was just another delivery. When I arrived, the street was darker than usual. Most of the houses had their lights off, except his. I walked up to the door, but before I could knock, it swung open. He was standing there, grinning, but this time, something felt different. He seemed too eager. "Come in, I've got your tip inside," he said, stepping aside. I hesitated. He had always handed me the money at the door before. Something in my gut told me to leave, but the promise of a good tip pulled me in. I stepped inside, and the door clicked shut behind me. As I handed him the food, I noticed the windows were covered with heavy curtains. The air inside was thick and stale, like the house hadn't been aired out in days. He set the food down on a table and turned to me, still smiling. "That delivery app doesn't tell you much about the people you meet, does it?" he said, his voice low. I forced a smile, trying to keep things casual. "No, not really. Just the address." "Good," he said, stepping closer. "Because it's better that way." A chill ran down my spine. I glanced toward the door, calculating my exit. He was standing too close now, his eyes locked on mine. Before I could react, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife, holding it in front of him casually, almost like it was a game. I didn't wait to find out what he planned to do. I bolted for the door, yanking it open and sprinting to my car. As I sped away, I could see him standing in the doorway, still smiling, watching me drive off into the night. I quit delivering after that. And every now and then I still wonder, how many other drivers did he lure inside? How many didn't make it out? It was one of those nights where the rain came down in sheets, making it almost impossible to see more than a few feet ahead of me. I was drenched, tired, and just wanted to finish my last delivery and get home. The address was a small house in a quiet neighborhood, tucked away at the end of a dead-end street. It was dark, with no street lights, and the whole area felt deserted. When I pulled up to the house, it was completely black except for a faint glow coming from the front window. Looked like it was a candle, but I couldn't be sure. I parked, grabbed the food, and jogged to the front door, hoping to get this over with quickly. I knocked once, but there was no answer. I knocked again, a little louder this time, but still, nothing. No sounds inside, not even a light turning on. I was about to leave when the door creaked open, just an inch, barely enough to notice. I paused for a moment, feeling a chill run down my spine. I leaned in a bit, peering into the darkness. "Hello?" I called out, hoping someone would come to the door and take their order. But there was nothing, just silence. Against my better judgment, I nudged the door open a bit more. The house was dead quiet, except for the rain tapping against the windows. It felt wrong, like stepping into a void where no one had lived in years. The air inside was heavy, almost suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I shouldn't be there. I quickly placed the food just inside the doorway and turned to leave. But then I heard it. A whisper, soft and barely audible. "Don't go." I froze. My heart was pounding in my chest as I stood there, trying to make sense of what I just heard. The voice had come from inside, from the far corner of the room, but when I looked back, there was nothing, just darkness. I didn't wait to figure it out. I backed out of the house, my hands shaking, and slammed the door shut. As I hurried back to my car, I glanced over my shoulder one last time, and that's when I saw it. The candle in the window flickered out. In its place, I could barely make out a figure standing in the gloom, watching me. I jumped into my car and sped off, not daring to look back. To this day, I'm not sure if what I experienced was real or if I was just exhausted from the long shift. But every now and then, I think back to that night. The voice was soft, pleading, and terrifyingly cold. These stories are a reminder that even the most mundane jobs can take a dark turn when you least expect it. Delivering food may seem harmless, but as we've seen tonight, sometimes the unexpected can be far more terrifying than you could ever imagine. So, the next time you knock on a stranger's door or pick up an order late at night, remember these tales. Stay alert, stay safe, and trust your instincts, because you never know what's lurking behind that door. If these stories spooked you as much as they did me, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling tales. And always remember, what's waiting in the shadows may not always be what it seems.